Life is a counting time. Heartbeats, geological eras, trains arriving at stations reckoned up into the eternity of the circle of life. Drama, wonder and beauty are merely interpretations made by the human being when he retreats from his origin and where he returns, out of fear, ignorance and desire. And he called the two sides of this same place hell and heaven, wonder and beauty. All of this is gathered in extraordinary superabundance in a single location, Postojna Cave. Where the sharp-edged eastern spurs of the Alps overlook the Pannonian Plain, where the karst, which has lent its name to all similar geological phenomena around the world, touches the Adriatic Sea, there lies Slovenia. Between Venice and Vienna, at the crossroads of historical trade routes, it lives the life of a modern Europe state. It has always aroused interest. Thanks to its natural characteristics and its remarkable features, it has also been coveted. And so, Postojna Cave found its way onto old maps of wonders. Postojna is an ancient town that grew up beside a millennia-old trade route connecting Central Europe and the Mediterranean. Below the town, the river Pilka disappears underground into Postojna Cave. The large quantities of water and the specific composition of the soil have facilitated the development over the course of millions of years of an extraordinary cave system. More than 20 kilometers of cave passages are known today beneath the section of the surface between the Pilka Basin and Planinsko Polje. The river that disappears beneath the rock has long aroused people's curiosity in the past. Where does it go? What lies deep below the hill? Could it be hell? Before the visit of Austrian Emperor Franz in 1818, the local people decided to illuminate the cave for the occasion. Assistant lamplighter Luka Cic set off across the river, climbed onto the upper edge of the sheer wall of the Great Hall, and there a new, hitherto undiscovered continuation of the cave opened up before him. The karst is glorious in its interplay of stone and water. On the surface it washes away, but under the earth it builds. In areas where the permeability of the rock allows rainwater to percolate into the interior and the composition of the limestone allows it to be dissolved, extraordinary surface and subterranean formations develop. Owing to the distinctiveness of this phenomena in Slovenia, and thanks to a large number of scientific publications, the name of this region, Kras or karst, was adopted as the international term for this type of landscape. Science found answers to the wonder, but it has lost none of its beauty, since beauty cannot be explained. The rock that we see today on the surface formed in the sea from the various skeletons of marine organisms, mollusks and corals between 70 and 100 million years ago. Movements in the Earth's crust corrugated the originally flat strata, creating geological folds in the form of hills and valleys. The landscape we see today took shape some 5 million years ago. At that point, the predecessor of the river Pivka began to sink at the edge of the Flysch and flow underground towards the east. The formation of subterranean karst drainage is possible because water dissolves karst rock and carries it off in the form of a solution. Limestone is only permeable to water where there are cracks between strata and tectonic cracks. The corrosive power of water then widens these cracks into conduits or caves. At first, these underground channels, the predecessors of today's Postojna cave, did not allow water to flow freely. They were blocked by the debris that the river carried with it. But with time, of which there was no shortage, the channels widened and the flow became easier. Large, smooth passages formed. The river chiseled away the rock and moved ever lower. In these passages, dissolved calcium carbonate, the mineral that creates limestone, began to be released from the percolating rainwater. Rainwater can dissolve limestone because carbon dioxide from the air dissolves in it. When this water trickles through the soil, which contains a quantity of this gas that can be hundreds of times greater, the proportion of dissolved dioxide in it naturally increases significantly. This enriched water percolates through tectonic fissures and dissolves the rock. When the water reaches a cave, in which there is a smaller proportion of carbon dioxide in the air, this begins to be released from the water, since it is oversaturated. This, of course, causes the opposite process to dissolution, the precipitation and growth of calcite crystals. Precipitation begins on the roof of the cave even before the water droplet breaks off and falls to the floor. This is how a stalactite forms. More precipitation takes place on the floor. Here, stalagmites and large calcite mounds and crusts form. Tubular stalactites and the stick-like stalagmites beneath them grow very slowly. When a drop of water appears on the roof of the cave, carbon dioxide immediately begins to be released from its circumference, calcite begins to precipitate around the drop, and a hollow tube slowly forms, along which new drops of water flow. Below them grow stick-like stalagmites. These are of roughly the same thickness, 7 to 10 centimeters in diameter. Their thickness is determined by drops of the same size which spread over the same area when they hit the floor, after which calcite is precipitated from them. Usually, these dripstones grow at a speed of around 0.3 of a millimeter per year, or 3 centimeters every 100 years. On sloping ceilings, the drops do not break off, but slide down the same route. This is how curtains, flow stones, are formed. The oldest large dripstones in Postojna cave are some hundreds of thousands of years old. The stick-like stalactites are for the most part young. They began growing after the last ice age between 12 and 10,000 years ago. If we cut through a speleothem, we can observe growth laminae in the cross-section. These annual rings allow us to measure its age, to measure life. Who says that rock is dead? How impatient! What do these chronological dimensions represent in comparison with the history of humankind? When the Great Pyramid of Cheops was being built, this stalagmite reached up to here. Here, Columbus discovered America. Here, the first man walked on the moon.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
But the underworld is only apparently dead. Only at first glance is it a desert of stone and water. In 1831, at the foot of the underground hill known as Calvary, Luka Cic found a curious beetle with an inflated abdomen and long antennae. The find caught the attention of an amateur naturalist from Ljubljana, Ferdinand Schmidt. Since Cic and his clumsiness had managed to damage the delicate creature, Schmidt offered a reward of 25 florins to whoever found a new undamaged specimen. The reward was never paid. Cic died of plague shortly afterwards, and Schmidt himself, who had long sought the beetle, found a specimen himself 16 years later in the very same spot. He later wrote a scientific description of it as the first cave beetle and named it Leptoderus hogenvarte, choosing the common name Dobrovratnik, meaning tiny-necked one. This chance find led to many other discoveries. Over the course of many years, in other caves too, he discovered a whole series of animals of various kinds. This was the birth of speleobiology, the branch of biology concerned with the peculiarities of subterranean organisms and the underworld as a habitat. Two million years ago, at the end of the Pliocene epoch, when the tropical climate of this part of the world was replaced by a colder climate, many animals retreated permanently underground. The first difficulty to which they had to adapt after moving in was probably the lack of food. Naturally, they adapted to this by slowing their metabolism. In this way, some animals can survive without food for years at a time. The majority of troglobites, animals that are no longer capable of surviving in normal conditions on the surface, are very pale in color and are usually eyeless. Eyes have been replaced by other sensory organs. Water is much more bountiful than land. Numerous species of crustaceans, snails and worms live in it, and even the famous Proteus or orm is an aquatic animal. The Proteus has been known to local people for a very long time, a mysterious phenomenon that could be observed every time that high water levels flushed it out from the underworld. In 1768, a Viennese physician and zoologist called Laurenti earned his place in history as the discoverer of this new animal species. He named it Proteus anguinus after the Greek god Proteus, the herdsman of sea creatures and the servant of Poseidon, the god of the sea. Its delicate, apparently colorless skin, reminiscent of the skin of a fair-complexioned human being and sensitive to the light, led to it being popularly referred to as a human fish. It spends its whole life in the water, breathing through external gills and its skin, although it also has rudimentary lungs. It can live for up to 100 years and can survive for several months out of the water. The surface of its snout contains sensory organs not identified in any other amphibian to date. These are ampullary organs that can detect weak electrical fields in the water environment and probably serve for communication, detecting prey and orientation during migrations. Interestingly, the human fish can go without food for an extremely long time, even up to 12 years. The Proteus caused a sensation in scientific circles. Hugh Falconer wrote to Darwin himself, describing the Proteus he planned to give him. The first live Proteus was brought to London Zoo by the British scientist Sir Francis Galton. He tucked the creature under his cloak so that it would not freeze on the journey across the Alps. But the Proteus, once believed to be a baby dragon, continued to maintain its secrets. Another interesting fact is that the Proteus reaches sexual maturity when still in the larval stage. The Proteus is oviparous and the female deposits her eggs on the underside of flat rocks. Tadpole-like larvae develop from the eggs and grow to adulthood in a few months. Luka Cic's discovery opened the doors to karst tourism and stimulated the exploration of the hitherto unknown subterranean world. Postojna soon became famous throughout the world. The local people contributed by making the cave safe, opening it to visitors, and by starting to advertise it and explore it. In 1857, the Southern Railway connecting Vienna to Trieste was completed. A visit by the Austrian Emperor Franz Joseph and his wife Elizabeth coincided with this occasion. Never before had the cave been so magnificently illuminated. Postojna was the highest lying station on the Southern Railway, which increased the fame of the cave and multiplied the number of visitors. In July 1868, Thomas Cook brought the first 14 English tourists to visit the cave. Thus, Postojna Cave joined Venice, Vienna and Paris as one of the destinations offered by the world's first travel agency. Since the path through the cave did not involve any major inclines or descents, it was decided that human power would be enough to propel carriages through it. Aboard the new two-seater carriages, visitors took 5 minutes to travel through a section of cave that earlier visitors had taken half an hour to cover on foot. Passengers aboard the world's first underground railway were pushed by the cave guide with no great difficulty into the dark, dreadfully beautiful underworld, the kingdom of Pluto. As visitor numbers continued to grow, it became apparent that electric lightning and a motorized train were needed. The small man-powered railway was no longer able to cope. Even today, Postojna Cave is the only show cave with a railway network. Past visitors to the cave have included the most distinguished statesmen and the noblest royal families of Europe and beyond. It has filled the greatest explorers with enthusiasm and inspired great artists. For centuries, it has been a source of inspiration to artists who have used it as a motive for their imagination to create an allegory through which they describe the divine and the unfathomable and beauty and dread. One of the greatest sculptors of all time, Henry Moore, called Postojna Cave nature's most magnificent sculpture, while Sigmund Freud wrote that Dante would have struggled far less with his description of the Inferno had he visited it. Some visitors have left their own mark on the damp walls of the cave. The oldest signatures date from the 13th century and are already covered by calcite deposits, but countless more recent signatures can still be seen today. Graffiti are not a new idea. The Passage of New Signatures houses one of the first underground laboratories in the world. This is a modern facility well equipped with vivariums, terrariums and aquariums, where visitors can get a closer look at the denizens of eternal darkness. The speleological station is also suitable for in-depth research and scientific study. For ordinary visitors and cavers, the variegated world of Postojna Cave ends at the outflow sump, submerged passage in Pivka Cave. Cave divers, who in 1999 swam from Pivka Cave towards Planina Cave through 3 further sumps and discovered a total of around 1.5 kilometers of new passages, have still not managed to conquer the whole of the Postojna Cave system. Will they ever? The challenge remains. Millions of people have already visited Postojna Cave, and hundreds of thousands of them return time and time again. Today, a visit to the cave is a comfortable experience and a full one. But if you want more, To revive the spirit of Luka Cich and experience the live thrill of discovering the new in the essential sense of the word, you are invited to take part in a more detailed visit to the underground and an adventure in the pathless world of the caves. Here is humility. The arrogance of human reason disappears in the unfathomable subterranean world. Beauty constantly revealed anew. In the frenzied pace of the modern world, Postojna Cave is peace and beauty in eternity. And this is exactly what the human soul yearns for.